Hello again, this is Elizabeth Hawkins and I'm back with part 2 of my healing project for ICSR 525. This second part was tied into the readings we have been doing in class, particularly Matthew Sully and Elizabeth Tova Bradley. It has been an intense second part due to the powerful emotions these readings have brought out. Throughout my meditation sessions, I too have experienced powerful feelings and received visions of different colors and spirals. The spiral motif continuously appears, I noticed, through much of my project, at least in my meditations anyway. Maybe I can work the idea of the spiral into a proper title for my project, like the spiral of love activism. I love that idea. Gave me from part 1, and that was great, Kaylin, thank you. But the spiral, as you remember from my self-portrait, represents evolution and growth of an individual's consciousness. I think that has become a very prominent feature within what we've discussed, read, and learned in class, particularly these past few readings. We've spiraled outward to see the reality of animal abuse and opened our consciousness to the smallest things, like the snail. The spiraling snail shell. Interesting. Most recently, in this particular section, there has also sprung up the connection to chakras, at least for me. Originating from the Hindu tradition, chakras, for those that don't know, are points on the body where energy meets and flows through us. There are 7 important chakras in our body, and the reason I bring them up is because they will most likely return in part 3, and at least one particular chakra continues to surface within part 2. So the 7 chakras in order are the root chakra, which is the base of the spine, aka the animal chakra, the sacral hara chakra, which is the genitals, and that's self-explanatory, the solar plexus chakra, which is the rib cage in the stomach, the heart chakra, self-explanatory again, the throat chakra, again self-explanatory, and the third eye chakra, which is the spot between the eyes on the brow, and last but not least, the crown chakra, the area above the head. Now, this idea originated in Hindu tradition, like I said, but it was eventually adopted by modern Druidism as another way for humans to connect 3 things together in perfect harmony. And these 3 things are the physical form connected to the spirit, which connects this physical form to nature herself. Part 2 of my project was more poetry than art. I found the Sully readings particularly draining emotionally, and I think we all felt that way, so Tova Bradley was definitely a pick us all up. Throughout my meditating during our Sully readings, I most certainly needed healing of my emotions, so I wrote several limericks for the project to help lighten the damp mood and put a little humor into this project as well. I must admit, though, I haven't written a limerick since grade school, so they are going to be a bit rusty and probably not within the official limerick definitions, but definitions were made to be stretched a bit. The first limerick I am sharing is the very first one I've written in years. After the first reading of Sully, I was kind of disgusted and angry and depressed. Mostly disgusted with the fact that I belonged to this race of beings that tortured and abused creatures deemed inferior to us. But man does not have dominion over every creature. My limerick over man explains, dominion over all was given to man, and Cat objected, "That's your plan?" So God called a truce, none of this abuse, and put Cat's dominion over man. So it was a funny little limerick that doesn't really have any sort of deep meaning to it except to brighten the day. it's mostly written for those of us who have owned a cat or currently own a cat. Although if you were to look deeper into this limerick, I think it could also teach us that humans aren't as dominant as they believe. If we look at the biblical creation story, there's religious evidence that animals were created first and mankind second. In terms of science, I think human beings evolved from animal-like creatures. Well, apes. But, so, I mean, animals came first in the evolutionary chain. If anybody who is more knowledgeable in science and evolution can expand on that, please do. The second limerick to cheer us, mostly me, up, I wrote rather quickly during the second part of our Sully reading. This was also during the week when we had really bad weather, I think, and the power shut down at my house. So overall, it was a rather dreary week, and my soul needed a quick boost of happiness and giggles. This limerick is titled A Cat's Opinion. Weird, these limericks I'm writing are cat-themed. Anyway. There was once an arrogant cat who sat down to admire my hat. He laughed and he purred. It caused quite a stir when he said, "What the hell is that?" Again, I think this limerick demonstrates the idea that man's dominion comically is not over every creature. They can still find ways to fight back. And as we've learned and discussed majority of the time, it takes the voice of another human to speak for the animals. Animals have voices, but there's a language barrier between our species. So unless Dr. Dolittle turns into a real person, we won't be able to understand animal talk. We can learn from their body language, but that's about it. And I still think that's important. Communication, I mean. Communicating the truth about right and wrong, solidifying those definitions to others, that can help educate other humans and open them to the realities that nature's creatures face every day. We need to be the voices for the voiceless. Otherwise, the suffering and hardship will continue and basically cast a dark shadow underneath us all. This next poem isn't a limerick, but I wrote it while thinking about all the negativity that Sully has left. It isn't that I dislike his book, because his writing was very thoughtful and obviously stirred some powerful emotions. And in that way, he's a really great writer, because that's what great writers tend to do. When they want to communicate a powerful idea or stir a buried, forgotten issue. But this poem hopefully will at least stir some more positive feelings, like the feeling of hope. So here's the poem, There Is. There is terror and suffering all around, where the victims speak not a sound. There is the poor, abandoned in the rain, and we just look away, ignoring its pain. There is no shelter, no kind heart, no love, because that creature's so easily to dispose of. But there is always that one who is special, who knows the difference between abuse and gentle. There is always something you can do, an action to change another's view. Your actions can inspire that wonderful desire to hope. This one, well, not as good as my others, I admit. I think I might want to revise it before the final project. But the message is basically that the healing process can be started by just one person, one voice. Step up, speak out, and you never know what you can stir within others. I mean, if we look at history, we see so many examples of how one thing, whether a voice, an event, or an action, stirs the ability of others to stand up and say, "Hey now, that's wrong, let's make it right again." And hope is part of healing, I think. It's a slow process, like the crawling of the snail, but it can produce big changes. But the process has to start somewhere, like with a simple exchange of words, like a discussion or a conversation, or just communication in any form. Going back to chakra, I would like to note that Communication also lies under the throat chakra, which has been significant within my meditations earlier in this part of my project. The throat chakra also represents the search for the truth, continuing to grow and search and spiral outward. And I think it's interesting how I have found so many of these types of symbols in nature that are right outside my house. For example, this next piece of art is dedicated to that. It doesn't have a title yet, but basically it's the bamboo stalks that grow just outside my house, and in the background is the Aztec symbol for the home. Bamboo itself symbolizes some of what I think Tova Bradley was showing us in her book, basically teaching us to recognize the simple little things. Bamboo also teaches us to be flexible in order to adapt to our natural surroundings. But the greatest thing I think it represents is to empty ourselves of our fears, doubts, and prejudices, and that way we can fill ourselves up with new possibilities and new wisdom. We don't have to make things complicated, or else we miss out on the simplest of life's and nature's pleasures. For example, I've found that taking even a few minutes out of one's day to meditate and sip some nice tea has made my stress level drop. Something as simple as meditation or a cup of tea can work wonders. And communication, I believe, was the theme of this part of my project. Nature herself is full of simple, small things that can speak volumes. From the tiny snail to a thin stalk of bamboo, everything communicates to us in different ways. Every communication has a different meaning behind it. Changing one's perspective can reveal a whole new meaning to what the natural world is telling us. So let's communicate with others and spread the knowledge around. You never know what will stir up as a result.